Parents, let's talk about baby floor seats. You've got so many varieties out there. There's the Bumbo, the Hugaboo, the Fisher-Price Sit Me Up floor seat, and many, many more. Now, these products often claim that they help your baby learn to sit when they're not yet ready to sit independently, and also work on their fine motor skills. Today, unfortunately, I'm here to tell you that's not true at all, and I'm going to debunk these myths and give you some alternative strategies that will definitely help work on your baby's sitting skills and their overall fine motor development. Before we get into it, make sure you click on that free PDF document in the description box below, which covers what you can be expecting in your baby's first year of life. It'll give you an invaluable peace of mind, as you'll know what developmental milestones to expect and when to be concerned. Also, if you want to make parenting significantly easier, make sure you start now by subscribing to my channel, where you'll learn the tips and tricks I've learned over the last 10 years practicing as a pediatric occupational therapist and being a mum to 2 children. So let's debunk those myths about baby floor seats. The first myth we're going to cover is that baby floor seats help your baby learn to sit independently when they're not yet ready to sit. Now, this is totally incorrect, and that's for a number of reasons. Firstly, when your baby is placed into a baby floor seat, they're actually not yet ready to sit independently. So to get them into this position, the equipment such as the Bumbo or the Hugaboo or the Fisher-Price Sit Me Up floor seat essentially fixes your baby's hips so that they can't move. And that means that the equipment itself gives them so much support. So the seats often come up past their hips, up near their shoulders, and kind of wraps around the baby. That essentially means that their tummy muscles turn off because they're not needed to sit upright, because the equipment itself is sitting them in that position. The other thing is, sitting is a really dynamic skill, so your baby needs to develop that ability to control their head, their neck, their trunk, and their hips and their legs when they're in sitting, and they need to be able to correct any kind of imbalance in weight. So when they start to shift to the side, they need to use their trunk muscles to bring them back to the middle. When they're sitting in baby floor seats, they don't have that ability because they're essentially fixed into that sitting position, so they aren't able to correct any side movement at all. So it's not working on that dynamic skill which was required for sitting. And the last reason that this myth isn't true is that when your baby's sitting in baby floor seats, particularly the Bumbo, their hips are placed in posterior tilt to basically anchor them into sitting. But when they're placed into posterior tilt, that means that their hips are angled backwards, which means that their back naturally falls back because gravity is pushing against it. So to get into a seated position at this point, they start to curve their spine and their neck. This is the exact opposite position that we want when you're looking at independent sitting for babies. So it definitely doesn't help on working on your baby's sitting skills, but activities that do help in developing your baby's overall sitting skills and their muscles that are required to sit are the general ones that we always recommend. It's the tummy time. Tummy time works on increasing your baby's head control, helping develop their back extensor muscles, and also shoulder stability. Now, if your baby finds tummy time difficult, make sure you check out my video on tummy time, where I cover the 4 different tummy time techniques that you can use that are gonna make it easier for your baby to do tummy time. And then the other activities that you can do is letting your baby play on their back. When they're lying on the floor, they're reaching out against gravity to look at toys and hit toys. But the great thing when they're lying on the floor on their back is that they start to kick their legs, and that works on activating their tummy muscles, which is a muscle required to sit. Now, if your baby is starting to sit for a very short period of time, or they're around 4 months of age, you can start supporting them into sitting. And to do that, you yourself sit on the floor and have your legs out straight in front of you, and you place your baby in between your legs. So essentially your thighs will act as some side support for your baby, and they'll be able to kind of lean on them and prop on them if they start to fall to the side and recorrect their sitting balance. But if they need a bit more support from you, so they're not able to kind of achieve that seated position without your additional support, you can provide support by holding them. Initially, you can hold them at their rib cage, so around their ribs, which will give them a lot more support because you're providing more trunk support. And as they get stronger, you can move it to their hips and further down, and then you can remove it completely. Now you can also use a nursing pillow to help your baby when they're not yet able to sit for a long period of time, so they can sit for a short period of time but then they topple over. The nursing pillow, you just place that around them when they're in sitting, and again that essentially provides them with side support so that they can lean on the cushion to bring themselves back up into sitting if they start to fall over. And the other added benefit is that when they do topple over, which they are going to do quite a lot when they're first learning to sit, it gives them a bit more cushioning so it's not a harder fall for them. So the second myth that these baby floor seats claim is that it helps promote your baby's fine motor development. I actually personally think, as an occupational therapist, whenever I see a child in these floor seats, it actually doesn't promote fine motor development, it actually hinders it. And that's simply because the amount of support that's required to help the baby sit in an upright position means that the equipment is up so high that babies generally have their arms resting up really, really high, which is really difficult when you're getting them to try and play and interact with toys. It's not a functional position, it's not a position we would encourage at all. The other reason is, as we talked about before, when your baby's hips are placed in posterior tilt and they're having to adopt that really curved position to sit, then their arms are essentially like this, and again, it's not a functional position. It doesn't help work on fine motor development. My preferred position to work on fine motor development when they're under 4 months of age is generally getting them to lie on their back and play underneath the play gym, because that encourages them reaching out and batting toys and grasping them initially. When they're over 4 months of age, I would recommend placing them in a pram, which is in slight recline, and then placing a toy on their chest which they can play with and interact with. And also when they're about 5 months, you can start using a high chair when you provide a bit more support in the high chair, but definitely from 6 months, I would put them in the high chair to work on that fine motor development if they're not yet sitting. So those are a lot safer options to do that are actually promoting good use of their hands. Now, if you're still thinking about buying a baby floor seat, I want to encourage you to think about how often your baby is actually going to use this piece of equipment. So for how many months? So typically a baby doesn't yet have the ability to sit upright in these baby floor seats comfortably until after 4 months of age, and that's because that's when they have the head control and the trunk control to adopt this position when they're in those baby floor seats. So if you think about it, babies typically start to sit independently for a really short period of time, from anywhere from 5 to 7 months. So the most your baby is going to use this piece of equipment is for 2 months. And when they're using it, they're probably only using it about 20 minutes a day. So after that 2 months, you're then going to need to put it away into the cupboard. I would encourage you, if you're wanting a piece of equipment that's going to get your baby off the floor to give them a different viewpoint of the world, I would actually recommend buying a baby bouncer seat. And that's purely because you can use this piece of equipment from birth till they start sitting up independently. So you can use it for 6 months. Also, as I said, after about 4 months, you can start using the pram when it's in slight recline to bring them up into a seated position. And after about 5 to 6 months, you can start using a high chair to bring them up into a seated position. So you don't need to buy another piece of equipment like a floor seat if you're buying it purely to get your baby off the floor and give you some hands-free time. So those are the reasons I wouldn't recommend buying a baby floor seat like a Bumbo, a Fisher & Price baby sit-me-up chair, or a Hugaboo, and alternative options that you can use, as well as activities that will develop your baby's gross and fine motor skills. Make sure you click on that free PDF document in the description box below, and subscribe if you want to make parenting significantly easier, and hopefully I'll see you next week where I'll share more parenting tips and tricks.